Hey, 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 this is Seagrove, and I'm here today with Brad and Azul, two guys who have been on top of the meta and making the decks and playing the decks that have been doing super well at the last few regionals. If you guys just want to quickly introduce yourselves, Brad, why don't you go first?
Sure. I'm Brad Curcio, repping Someone's PC. I've been playing for about a decade now.
And Azul?
Azul, Garcia, Griego, play for CCG Castle. I've been playing like 7 years.
Okay. I just got GG is also your
Yeah.
initials. I'm really quick. Okay. So we want to talk about the meta and how you guys have been able to stay on top of the meta and even define the meta at these last few tournaments. So coming into what was the first standard one? Hartford? I
Mhm.
Yeah,
believe
Hartford.
you guys were on the Turbo Turtles. Is that correct?
Well, it was
For the first
less
standard?
Or
for the first
Volcanion?
in. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
Volcanion. That's what ended up winning, right?
yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
like I'm
with
all mixed
Igor.
up here. Okay, so yeah, how did you guys come to the conclusion that Volcanion was the best deck, and or at least the play, and um, and especially well, we'll start there. How did you all come to the conclusion that that was the play for the tournament?
So I was the only person who was actually set on playing Volcanion the night before the tournament, and I just wanted to play it
Yep.
because there was not a whole ton of fire hype. People knew about Ho'osalazal. No one really cared about Volcanion as like a straight Volcanion as a deck. People knew about Ho'osalazal. Uh, there was not even that much hype around that, and like people were beating that with like Metagross and stuff, or even Garb, so no one was afraid of Ho'osalazal. Volcanion was on no one's radar. I was the only one who was set on it the night before the tournament, and I wasn't so sure about it because everyone was so unsure about it. But I was
Hmm.
like, let me play a set against Pendarvis and Brad, and I think I went 5 or 6-1 against Gardevoir, because that's the only matchup that's really iffy because everything else is like an auto win. So I think I went like 5-1 or 6-1 between against Brad and Pendarvis the night before the tournament, and then it kind of set us
Yeah.
all up to play Volcanion.
Okay, so
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, yeah, to elaborate on that, basically, I wanted to play Drampa-Garb the entire time, but Azul wanted to keep testing random stuff like the entire week before. And so I kind of wasn't really like listening to him until he started playing it. So Volcanion always sounded decent because there was so much Gardevoir hype. So people were playing like Metagross or Golisopod or anything like that to beat Gardevoir. And then you just come and take those free auto wins. And then if you could actually beat Gardevoir with Volcanion, then it would be great.
Right.
So Azul put in two enhanced hammers to help with that matchup. And then like the matchup turned into I don't think it was actually like favored for us, but it was very, very close and definitely winnable. So
Yeah.
the theory was you would take free wins against Metagross and Golisopod, trade evenly with the Guardies, and you'd be doing pretty well for the tournament.
Okay.
Yeah. Especially to get to just to get to day two.
The enhanced hammers were sort of heralded as the what turned the Gardevoir matchup or made the at least 50-50. Um, and then people said, especially among better players, that's not going to win it anymore because it's a known quantity now. Is that the case?
Yeah, to an extent, like it's not as useful. I know, like I played against Kenny Britton, very good player, round one of Hartford. And the enhanced hammers definitely caught him off guard, and he probably would have played differently knowing I played two. He
Hmm.
saw the first one, and then when I brought the second one out, he definitely didn't expect it. So it definitely would have changed our set if he had known I was playing him. But it also the enhanced hammers are there to like prevent two big guardies getting set up or one massive guardie getting set up too fast. So even if they know you play the enhanced hammers, they're just putting less energy in play anyway. So it still kind of does the same thing
Right.
or the same effect that you're looking for. It also means they might just discard DCEs over attaching them and then dig for more fairies, which is also fine because eventually Gardevoir can actually just run out of energy or like be forced to use their GX attack where they don't want to get energy back.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so Volcanion's hyped all of a sudden because of this tournament. It went from, I guess, just Azul basically playing it, and now it's like the deck all of a sudden. So coming off of that, you guys go to what was this last one? Uh,
Vancouver.
Vancouver.
Vancouver. Thank you.
Yeah.
So you guys go to Vancouver, and now you're on Drampa-Garb. Why the switch, and why was that the play?
So on the flip, I was on Drampa-Garb for the entire time for Hartford.
Right.
I was still not totally convinced in the matchup between Volcanion and Drampa-Garb because I thought it was at the very least incredibly close. But then going into Vancouver, like we also kind of conveniently helped ourselves beat it the next weekend because Enhanced Hammer is good in that matchup, but it's just another item that gets played. Right. So if there's tons of Enhanced Hammers, tons of elixirs, things like that, then that's good for us. Yeah. And I was in Drampa-Garb testing, I was always convinced in the Gardevoir matchup was strictly favored for Drampa-Garb. So going into Vancouver, I expected still to be a ton of Gardevoir, less Metagross and Golisopod because of the Volcanion hype, and then a bunch of like Volcanion or Fire decks, and with those and a little bit of mirror matches, and I'd be fine playing against like those three matchups pretty much all day.
Right.
Golisopod was the sketchier matchup, but I also think we're favored in that anyways. So I thought Drampa-Garb was just like literally the best deck in the format, and going into Vancouver, I don't think anything changed with that.
Okay.
Yeah, the natural meta shift kind of played into Drampa-Garb's hands pretty well.
Okay.
Of like what should be expected.
Yeah.
So then coming from this tournament, say we had another tournament coming up in the same format, which obviously now would have the mini set, but if it were the same format, what would be the play?
I think Drampa-Garb still.
Yeah, I think I would still stick with Drampa-Garb. I'm actually kind of surprised that Drampa-Garb didn't win the event. I know Brad got very unlucky, and I got very unlucky. I got pretty unlucky for my first two rounds of the tournament. I didn't even actually play against Gardevoirs, which I was hoping to play against. I said I got a little bit unlucky on my first couple rounds. I know Brad overall got pretty unlucky because he was pretty set up there with the points going from day one to day two.
Yeah.
And then I don't know. Besides that, I guess I don't know who else was playing Drampa-Garb out of players I would expect to win the tournament. I know Xander got to top 4.
Right.
And Sam Chin got unlucky in top 8 a little bit. Like the matchup against Gardevoir is good, but it's by no means like an auto win. You can still very easily lose the matchup. So
yeah. So it's actually favored for Drampa.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. But it has to be played like I don't want to. I would have to like. I felt super comfortable whenever I played against it. I know Sam said he didn't feel the same way, and neither did Xander. But I think there's a certain way you have to play the matchup as the Garbodor player. So if you step out of that zone a little bit, I know Xander mentioned one of his plays where he went like turn 2 to kill a Sylveon with a Drampa, and I immediately don't feel like that is a proper play because you're trying to avoid the Gardevoir player running you over. And when you do a play like a turn 2 Drampa Berserk to kill a Sylveon, not even a Gardevoir, you're allowing them to just go Guardy, kill your Drampa. The Gardevoir is not pressured, and it has 3 energy on it.
Right.
So then all of a sudden it can just add more energy and start to one-shot everything on your board from there. So I definitely felt like the way you take the matchup is very slow, and you kill stuff, or you just sit there with Espeon EX as long as possible and try and keep a Potown in play. So I don't know if he made a misplay there or not with that. I know that was one play he said that he thought was questionable, so I was like unsure. But I feel like it definitely has to be played very properly from the Drampa-Garb players. The Gardevoir player can kind of do whatever they want as long as they keep attacking. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also perfectly fine to just Lysander up like rolls Curly at Gardevoirs and just start poking at them so that you will eventually set up for like a big Espeon EX turn. Even if you're not like winning the game off it, you're only taking like 2 prizes off of it. You're getting rid of their entire board, and they can't do anything about it. Another thing was there were a lot of times where my opponent would like turn 1 get a Sylveon out. I would be able to confuse it for 60 with Espeon. The next turn, whether they attack into it or not is kind of irrelevant. But they usually don't, or they would go like Candy Guardy or something, even with Potown out. But then I would just immediately devolve their entire board, so they would be left with nothing. So you could just sit there with Espeon EX and just say devolve every single turn, and they eventually, like, they have to go Candy Guardy, kill you, and then you can just stretch her and do it again. So like, they can't. You can make it so difficult for them to set up, or they're setting up under Potown. So if they do come up and kill you, you can just go, Berserk or Trash Lance and knock them out. Okay. So it's like, I know Sam was the biggest one who was not comfortable in the matchup. Granted, he went like 8-1-1 against it or something. But like, he was saying that if he was the Gardevoir player, he would be doing this, that differently or something like that. And he would have to play the matchup from the Gardevoir perspective a lot more. But he thinks that there is a lot more to the matchup than we let on. But I think overall we all had a very positive record, especially if, we weren't like bricking or something.
Right. So is that...
And if there was like go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, if there's like another format, or if there was like another tournament with this format, I think this format is quite literally done as far as like optimal lists and things like that. There's a few like 1 or 2 card changes for a lot of things. Like Mike Fouché posted the optimal Gardevoir list. So like there's basically the perfect list to play for any deck going forward.
Right.
So I don't think there's that much like innovation to go for another standard tournament. Even with the new set, it doesn't change too much, I don't think yet. But when Crimson Invasion comes out, it'll change. But like
Yeah.
for the most part, I think it's just kind of standard as to what you would expect.
So would you say the Gardevoir Drampa matchup is one of those matchups that may be favored for Gardevoir for players if two players who are playing aren't as strong, and then as the players get better, the Drampa gets more favored?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I think there's also the potential for Garbodor, no matter the player skill, to run over Gardevoir, just because you set up a turn to ability lock Garb and you just keep attacking, and it's like they don't find their field blowers or something like that's how it's a couple of my games when I beat Gardevoir, it was that simple. It was like I set up turn 2 ability lock Garb, and then I was like turn 3 divide GX, set up some stuff, killed some stuff. They eventually were able to attack my active, but they were never able to Secret Spring, so it was kind of just a wash.
And Gardevoir is more prone to bad bricks, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Moving over to Expanded, you guys were on that Garbodor list again for a long time before, but maybe the list wasn't as refined at Fort Wayne as it was at Daytona. Talk to me about how you knew that was the play and how the deck developed.
Well, going into Fort Wayne, it was a lot of, hey, Garbodor has been really good in Standard, but hasn't been played in Expanded yet. But then there's also a lot more broken items in Expanded that everyone's going to continue playing for sure. So why isn't Garb played? And then, you just play Garb with almost anything and you should be fine in Expanded. But then Necrozma made it to where like Turbo Dark was basically an auto win because you could soften up their entire board and then kill them with any one prize attacker. Oricorio made like Night March, Festive and things like that easy. So you just were able to put any other card in your deck to make any matchup you want better. So like for Fort Wayne, we played Giratina promo because of, Trevenant and I guess kind of Greninja, but
help me against Greninja.
For the most part, both Garbodors are insanely good in any format. So being able to Garbatoxin anything to shut them down, and then just Trash Lance to knock anything else out, and then Necrozma if you can't like start one-shotting everything. Okay. So it's just like you have the ability to do something. You have the ability to beat any deck with that deck, and if you don't, you can easily put something else in the deck to help any matchup. Pretty much. I
think our list for Fort Wayne actually ended up being like pretty close to optimal. Actually, we did make a lot of changes from Fort Wayne to Daytona, but that's because the meta shifted quite a bit. Like I think our list at Fort Wayne maybe 1 or 2 cards difference, but they weren't huge impact cards. Yeah. Like one of them would have definitely been Delinquent for Getsus, but I did get value out of Delinquent at Fort Wayne. You probably overall would have gotten more value out of Getsus, but I think the list overall wasn't that bad. I know Brad once again did not get so lucky on day 2, and I didn't get so lucky with matchups on day 1. I hit Brad, and then I hit a pretty poor matchup, which is just straight Golisopod, which is like very hard to beat. So those were my 2 losses, and it was just like that's just unfortunate. So yeah, I think the list overall was fine. It just didn't end up panning out as well as we had wanted before Wayne.
What were the meta shifts that you saw that made you change your list from Fort Wayne to Daytona?
So I guess one of the main ones is Mimikyu, and that's mostly just because Fire had an insane amount of hype from Fort Wayne to Daytona, and I was like, we may as well. I think the matchup is still fine without it, but with how much of it's going to be played, and Mimikyu is actually very good in the mirror match, which we also expected more of. So I was like, why not play it? If I was only afraid of the Fire deck, Turbo Turtles, I don't know if I would have committed to the Mimikyu because I actually think the deck is not very good. Turbo Turtles, so I don't really want to commit a tech spot for a deck that I don't think is very good and won't do very well even if it makes day 2. But I knew the mirror was coming. It's actually very good in the mirror because if they do something like Tool Drop or Trash Lanch, you can then use your Mimikyu and Copycat, but they cannot Copycat your Copycat, so they then have to sacrifice another of their Tool Drop attackers, most likely, into it. And you can actually get into a point, because their benches usually has a Drampa and like 2 Layla or something, where you actually don't have enough room to keep putting the attackers down, and then like you can get them into a spot where you can end them, and they can't find a Tool Drop or something when they need like a 1 prize attacker. So he's very good in the mirror match. It was also good in the Fire matchup. Go ahead.
Decent in so we expect like Jimmy and Igor to constantly play their Sable Garb. It's actually kind of decent against them because you can junk hunt. So
yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's very good against. I actually played against Jimmy 1 round or 2. It's very good against Sable Guard. If you win the first game, the second game should never end because you should just sit there and junk hunt. They junk hunt, you junk hunt, and you just sit there and junk hunt until you hit time.
Yep.
So I've been thinking about where's the meta go from here, the expanded meta go from here. And I was thinking, is there anything that can really handle that deck that isn't terrible in the meta? The only thing, because my thought, you guys can correct me on this, is you have to play something that hits for less HP than it has because of Mimikyu. Is that what is your thought process in considering how the meta is going to be going forward, or how to beat a top deck going forward, especially specifically this one?
If you, I don't know. So like, the thing with it was that it could counter anything. You could you could build it differently to beat anything. I guess Trevenant was one of the bigger awkward matchups, and then like straight Galissapod or anything that hits decently hard with a lot of HP that doesn't abuse special energy is kind of rough. But there's not, like, most of those decks that are good against it aren't good in the meta, like you said. So yeah. I mean, Trevenant's fine. Trevenant will always be Trevenant. So I don't really know, to be completely honest.
Yeah. I mean, I think Trevenant's Trevenant, so like anything can lose it. I think Trevenant matchup is actually overall favored. Yeah. But like 60-40, maybe even more. I don't know. Dryan seemed to deal with it pretty easily in the finals. Sable Garb, I would definitely say, is probably unfavored, but it's one of those decks where you still have Getsus, and you only need to win one game. You actually don't have to 2-0 Sable Garb. You just need to win the one game, and then from there, you should be able to junk hunt Getsus, lock them out of the game.
I think Sable Garb is unfavored, but I don't think you should ever really lose to it either. I think you should tie it more often than not, and then the games you don't tie, you should just obviously win.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's no deck on the radar that I can think of that I'm afraid of also being able to beat it and be a contender in the meta. There's probably something out there I'm not thinking of. There always is. I don't know. There's something out there for sure. But
current, then I mean, I'm sure there's something with like Zork or something, or the new big Ultra Beast dudes, but I don't.
Yeah, we have a new set coming to spice things up to try and deal with it for sure.
I also kind of expected Dimension Valley to potentially get banned, but
that didn't happen. So who knows?
That didn't. So.
Okay.
So I see. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm good. Go ahead.
So last question: how do you decide a deck is going to be the play? Like, just in general, do you just come up with a deck off the top of your head? Do you look at older archetypes, or like, do you look at what won the last tournament? How do you decide this is a good deck and this is the play?
So going into a tournament, there's almost always like, okay, so barring like brand new sets or whatever, there's always, if there's like been a tournament with the current set or the current format legal, looking at that, seeing what did well, what I guess people are more likely to lean towards. So like even when Pram won with Night March, more often than not, people don't copy Night March just because they hate Night March. Yeah. So like people will flock to Turbo Turtles or something like that. So being able to anticipate what people are going to flock to, and then hype going from there. So like going into, or like, so like if Galissapod was hype, but then Turbo Turtles becomes hype, Galissapod is no longer hype, so then you just need to beat that. So it turns into what did well, and then what is honestly hype, what people are talking about playing a lot. And then going from there, beating those main decks, and then making sure you don't just like, or if you're taking like a hard loss to something, make sure it's something that you don't expect to see more than once, kind of thing. And for the most part, there's always something like that in any format.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to add something to that as well?
No, not really. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Very cool. So do you guys have any shout outs or anything you want to give? Brad, why don't you start?
Yeah, just someone's PC.
Word.
Yes. Shout out to CCG Castle, CCG Castle, CCGcastle.com. Also TC Evolutions, TCEvolutions.com. Also check out my stream, twitch.tv/It's Azul, ITSAZUL, no space. That's pretty much it. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, of course.
And for myself, Flipside Gaming, you can get a discount if you use my username Seagrove in all caps, 10% off. So thanks again for your time, and really appreciate you guys coming out here and opening up your thoughts and brilliant minds to us. So thanks for that.
No problem. Sure.